Hello and welcome to the We Are All Human podcast. I am so grateful to have one of my good friends, Christa here, Christa Hardin. We're so blessed to have her on here and just get a piece of her wisdom and her loving heart and all that she has to offer. I know Christa from Enneagram and Marriage. She runs a Enneagram and Marriage Instagram account and also a podcast, and the Instagram account is for the podcast. And we all know that I love an Enneagram deep dive. And so that's how I found her, as I started listening to all of the Enneagram podcasts that I could, and found that her work in particular was very nuanced, and it took it a little bit deeper than the books were taking it for me, and showed how to apply Enneagram into daily lives, and specifically marriage and relationships. And so we all know that's a big part, because marriage and family and life and work all are centered around relationships. So we're so happy for the work Christa is doing. And so I basically learned how to integrate Enneagram into my life from Christa. I really appreciate you for that. And so we started talking over Instagram and kind of developed a personal relationship. And she also runs an Enneagram and Marriage collective group, which is really nice. It's a monthly meeting group, and you get to sort of have some personal coaching in a way to learn how to apply some of this stuff. And it's been really valuable. And we've all really kind of in that group kind of gotten to know each other really well. And it's like a little family support group. And I really, really appreciate that. But Christa she's very well diversified. She's coached couples all over the globe for 2 decades. Christa, do you want to give more of a background into how you got where you are?
Oh, thank you for that glowing intro. You are awesome, Katie. I love your podcast. I love the rich, deep conversations with you and all the wisdom that you bring to the table. I love how each of us has our own piece of the puzzle. So thank you. And the way I got started sharing my piece of the puzzle was just as a kid, hacking out family relationships and learning that I liked problem solving a lot. And it wasn't just encouragement. I'm a type 7 on the Enneagram. I do love to give that, but I also really love to help people to identify how they each are differing and how they're each really loved and meaningful. And I think that was something I gave even to my parents in their marriage, even though I saw my dad's harsher 8 temperament, my mom's softer 9-ish temperament. And I was able to just really help them to see one another and pass notes under their doors to each other sometimes. And it was really healing. Of course, you don't want to be doing that as a kid all the time, but it wasn't all the time. It was occasional. And it was really a special way for me to find my gifts, because it worked. And they would kind of crawl back to each other and, just laugh a little bit with me, like, what is our daughter being so silly and doing? And it was something I still love to do with my couples and my family today.
Oh, that is so awesome. I mean, that is really neat to hear how that sort of played out for you as a child. And so Christa has 2 psychology degrees and 1 in communication. And she's the founder of Reflections Counseling Center in Florida. And like I said, she's coached couples for over 2 decades. And she uses the Enneagram and other research-based marriage tools, Gottman and others, to help thousands of couples understand the nuance. And that's what I was talking about before, is taking it beyond just the words in a book, how it actually plays out into your life. The action step, which is, as a 5, someone who has a little bit of a hard time implementing. I can learn all the things, but the implementation is the part that I actually need help with. And that's what makes this group so great. Like I said before, she's the host of the popular Enneagram and Marriage Podcast. And she has created these Enneagram glow pairings, these glow guides. If you go to her website, and I'll put that in the show notes, there's just a wealth of freebies for one, and then also just so much information. She has these things called glow guides, and it's basically how the 2 Enneagram types, like the husband and the wife, or whatever partnership you're in, it shows your Enneagram pairings, and then it shows how you shine and present your best selves to each other when you're both in health and doing well. And it also kind of shows you your blind spots if you are, want some work to do or need to work on that. And like I said, she started the podcast. She has the community, the collective. She does coaches training. She trains coaches to be Enneagram and marriage coaches. And now has written the best-selling book, Enneagram in Your Marriage, Your Guide to Thriving in Your Unique Pairing. And here it is.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad.
We will definitely get into this later on in the podcast. But first of all, so you've already introduced yourself. So tell us a little bit, because people do kind of come to this podcast to learn a little bit about their Enneagram type and their nuance and how that plays out in people's lives. How did you find your type in the beginning? Can you tell a little bit about that journey?
Yeah, well, I went from just counseling to adding coaching to my practice. And I started following a very popular coach who I now know is an Enneagram 3, Michael Hyatt. And I just loved his practical guides. And he had the full focus planner. And I got one of those as my business was growing. And I started to even sort of tap out of having availability because I was getting a bit too full. So I said, okay, I've got to start, learning some different things. And yet what was so fascinating is that Michael Hyatt shared a personality inventory, which was the Enneagram. And I took it and just briefly saw it said, you're a type 7. And I said, oh, that's cool. I'm an encourager. I like to think about things. They said, you're a thinker, you're a head type. And it didn't go into that much depth, but it was just this brief analysis about what 7s are like. And actually, when I talked to a friend who is a therapist type 4 named Carla, a few months later, she said, have you ever taken the Enneagram? And I said, I did, but it was just this quick look and it was cute. And I'd done a lot of clinical assessments in the past and it didn't seem to even rival any of those. So she said, you need to give it a second look because there's so much depth here. And when she said that as a type 4, and I know her heart, even if I didn't know what 4 meant back then, I just knew, oh my gosh, she's one of the best therapists in the world. If she says I need another look, she knows I specialize in couples, I better do that. So I did, and I haven't looked away since. And to fully round out that story, it also helped me to see the shadows of 7 that I might need to niche down so that I wasn't all over and seeing all of these clients and doing all the things. So as I came to learn about the tool, I started to put it into practice pretty quickly, thankfully.
Do you feel like it definitely jumpstarts couples in a way that sort of gets them started at a place, kind of ahead of the game when they know their Enneagram type? Do you feel that way?
Oh my gosh, yes. I just had a male 9 recently say, oh my gosh, he's not a person of faith. He's not, and I won't share any of the personal story, but it was just so fun to hear him like, oh my gosh, it's like, me, it's like you're here with us. And yet we've only had, these many sessions and you're just like right exactly where we need you to track with us. And so that is such a gift because when you don't have a great tool to do that, unfortunately, it can take a lot longer. And even if you're just trying to hack out like, okay, let me figure out communication, it's like, this is so much richer and deeper where you really have the heart of like understanding as a 9, you don't feel hurt in this marriage. And for your listeners who know the Enneagram, they can imagine how much that could just fast forward your marriage work, not in a way that like you're not going to still have to do it, but it gives you the opportunity to know, like you said earlier, like you want to know what to do even, because that's also a hard part of counseling is even what do I assign to these people?
Right.
So it just helps so much.
Well, it kind of gets to like their core issue, right? I mean, that's your core longing, what you want the most out of life. And it kind of helps you feel heard, I guess, in that way as well. Like if your biggest thing is to feel heard and feel like you're a part of things, then it's a great place to start for sure. So can you tell us just, this may play out later in the podcast, but it may not. What's your subtype for those that listen?
Self-pres and sexual are my top 2, and they're very close to each other because my whole basis of my mission here is for the sexual dynamic, as you can imagine, the one-to-one, the closeness, the cohesion. But as a person, I really think the self-pres is just a bit higher. So I put that first to just say, I like my space, even amidst my people. I like to be near everybody. I like to make sure everybody's well. And then I really like to retreat into a book and then have some light conversation, but then retreat again to whatever I'm doing ideas wise. And so it's been kind of a journey to see how those two instincts really work together in my life. And then of course my shadow instinct of social also.
Yeah, I'm socially repressed as well. That's where I need to do most of the work. So I can
Mhm.
definitely get that one-on-one depth like what we're doing here and with different
Yeah.
people in my life, only a few people. But and then,
Mhm.
retreat, inside, but then, socially. But I think even if you don't know the Enneagram, and I do say this in every episode almost, like if you don't know the Enneagram, even the subtypes, even knowing your subtype, knowing the way that you look at the world, if you look at it just kind of like a self-pres, like what do I need? What are my resources, my health, my financial resources, my rest, my comfort, or if you look at it socially, what's everyone else doing? How do I fit in with that dynamic? Or the sexual, kind of the broadcast attract energy, looking to push boundaries, looking for just the really dramatic, really rich pieces. And
Mhm.
so that really helps to know which one of those that you lead with, I think.
Yes, I love that.
So tell us a little bit about, let's go back to young Christa. I'm
Hmm.
always like interested in this since we're talking about life purpose and calling. I feel like that starts when you're young. So
Mhm.
where did you grow up for one?
The Dirty D near Detroit. We call it that.
Is
Headed
that what they
back
call
there
it?
tomorrow. Yes. They didn't back then. But the suburbs of Detroit and just, public school, youngest of four kids, started busing to school at about 4 and just enjoyed a lot of independence, but also had to kind of be pushed into some of that as the youngest sibling. We know how kids are. If you're the youngest listening out there, you know how it is. They like force you to grow up. So had a little bit of that. Also had a type 3 sister just above me 3 to 4 years who had had some more trauma than I had had. And so she had a few more emotional needs. So I sort of in those young years learned to be independent because she needed a lot. So sometimes she would get to stay home from school and I'd be like almost, get out the door, you're fine. She needs, like, she's obviously having stomach ache or something. And so it was interesting kind of being under a type 3 and having to sort of fend for yourself because you saw how much that child would take up the space.
I feel like that is so interesting too. As a parent with 3 children, I know that you have 3 children as well. It's just, and we
Mhm.
didn't even say that. Krista's married, y'all, and she has kids. She- but I think as a parent, though, it's so wild how all these different children can have all these different, very different experiences under the same parents sometimes. So I just
Yeah,
wanted to
me
throw that
too.
in. It's where I am
Yes,
right now.
me too. Yeah, but we grew up together. Her and I are very close now, and she and I were close then, but the competitive edge with a 3 was very
Yeah.
tough. There was a lot of fights about who loved which, child more, and our mother was that 9 who would just finally wear down and even sometimes say a name, which was so silly because I think she was just like, "Get off my back. I love
Did,
Abby more or Krista
did
more."
she did she say, what do you want me to say? Did she say that a lot? What do you want me to do?
Yeah, she
What do
was
you want
that
me to
kind of
say?
person. Yeah, you
Yeah.
could wear her down.
Oh my gosh. I feel like,
We did.
I can be worn down into a not speaking at all.
Yeah, specify.
Um, so what did you enjoy doing the most as a little child? Like what brought you
Mm.
joy? What did you like to do?
I loved creating. I loved imagination. I had an imaginary friend named Teresa at one point. I had a lot of coloring, a lot of dolls, a lot of relationships within my dolls and Barbies. Occasionally, I would even get up on my little Fisher Price Playhouse fire station, which was sort of old and outdated because I'm not just the youngest of four, but there was a 10-year gap. So a lot of my toys were older. Our swing set out back didn't work much. My father was a teacher, very literary, not good at fixing things. So I got everything broken And it just sort of helped me to make, oh, that was my platform. It wasn't just this broken fire station with no toys left in it. It was a platform for me to stand on and speak to my Mapletown little animal figurines. And so it was fun to have, these experiences that just helped me to expand my creativity. I love that about my childhood. There's so much hard, but there's also so much good about childhood. And I think that was one of my favorite parts, was we had this messy basement. And I just remember feeling like it was a treasure trove by day to go search around it. And then by night, sometimes I would have nightmares about it, like what's down there. And so it was an intriguing home to grow up in. We had a creek out back. It was just an interesting life. And I did want more toys. My best friend had every toy you could think of. And we would go to her house for the toys and then my house for the snacks. And so we would just run back and forth and be like, Krista's, toys are like obviously creative, but we also want to know about that new Barbie over here, strawberry shortcake. So we would head back and forth all day long between the two houses, about 7 houses down the street from each other.
That's hysterical. That's funny because it's like, that's sort of how we grew up too. And we grew up kind of in a rural area, and I'm not the youngest, but I'm the third out of 4. And I don't really ever remember caring too much about toys, to be honest with you. I played with whatever was there whenever I felt like it, but I was mostly outside and doing like imaginary things like outside. But I'm tracking with you, because I would definitely put myself, especially during some hard times growing up, I would definitely put myself in some imaginary times and like in a totally different world. And it was wild. And I love that you were so creative, and it's so interesting that you had a platform that you would speak to everyone, and now your platform is virtual.
I know. It's so interesting. Come to find out that kind of being raised like that was not really creating expansiveness for me, like in that way where I would have been really good speaking publicly. Otherwise, I've had to work at that, and I like it somewhat, but it just costs more energetically because I'm not a social subtype. So it just costs me more to do actual people speaking, because I think, how some of your listeners might like tri-type, having a 4 and a 9 in my tri-type really drag my 7 down. So people often don't even know I'm a 7, but it's definitely the lead. Everyone in my family is like, sees it all day because we're within the home and they can see it. But once I'm out and about with my clients, I'm peacemaking, as I mentioned, with my mom and dad or whoever it is, I'm always finding everybody's depths. And so bringing that to the masses is exhausting. And so anywhere and everywhere I go, even dance weekend with my girls this last weekend, everybody was like asking me in line for marriage help. And they're like, you talked her head off the whole hour, and I was enjoying it, but it was exhausting.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, I'm tracking with you on that. I get exhausted for anything like that, but I'm like super nervous and awkward. So at the beginning of the podcast, I'm always like, how much do I need to trim out of that awkwardness? Then I can come back and like re-record like the beginning where I speak. So
you did great today.
But you're very good. I mean, do you ever get nervous? I know energetically like it might cost you, but do you get nervous speaking in front of people?
It just depends. Not lately, but I'm sure there will be times, because when I was taking courses at Eastern Michigan University, where I did my communications courses, I had to major in it because I sensed that I was going to be called to speak. And I think maybe even from those childhood memories. So I remember going, I could make this communications minor into a double major with psychology, and I better do it because I'll probably be speaking. And I remember just forcing myself, go first, do it. And it was painful. And then having to take advanced public speaking and all these bigger classes. I'm like, what are you doing, Christa? But I was building my career. And I guess there's just this part of me that knew I'm not going to be just counseling. And so I'm really glad sometimes we get these extra little trainings we don't even know we'll use. And it's helped me to inform that I feel like God doesn't waste the years. He redeems the years. And that's been very much true in my life, to see that kind of come back to where now it's not as nerve-wracking to speak.
So can you talk about, you just mentioned, like, I felt like I was being called to speak. Like, is there anyone, I know I'm always looking for like a dramatic moment, but was there any one moment or any like collection of moments or experiences that sort of like indicated that you would be called to speak or
I
get
think
your
it's
word out to
just
the masses?
I think it's just the learning and the wisdom that I got from life's experiences and all the books that I'd read made me feel an inner responsibility. And I don't know if that can resonate with you or any of your listeners, but I
Yes.
have so much information in a
Yes.
level about this, people and how they work that not many people around me had. Of course, we know there's so many that do have that nuance, but there's even more who don't. And so I was just around a lot of people who didn't share my gift. And I'm like, this needs to get out there. And it's going to take me to be good at speaking in order to do it. So that was just starting when I was in high school on a regular level. But by college, it was, that time frame was starting to saturate me with, you have this vision, you have this purpose, you're good at helping people with counseling, and now you need to be ready to speak about it. So get yourself ready. So it was
Oh my
levels
gosh.
and steps.
Wow. That is so impressive that you were like putting things together and like really having that forward thinking vision, which is what I definitely wish I had. I'm
I
definitely
love the
like,
focus of fives.
I'm definitely looking in the background a lot, trying to make sense, like what lessons can I learn from this to move forward. But it's like I spend so much time looking back, that sometimes I forget to move forward. But I love how all your vision sort of like kind of came together. So, talk about, do you have any specific like influences as a child or, as an adolescent growing up? That
Yeah.
sort of, mentors, if you will, that kind of helped you out with this sort of path, encouraged you?
Yeah. I think that in my day-to-day life, my mom was that for me and was very strong through a lot of hardship. So I got to see her continue surviving, even though she had every reason to give up. And so that has been such a humbling lesson for me when I come in with that 7 entitlement of just like, wow, a lot of people don't have that entitlement and they're really kind and humble. And I think that that's something that I continue to learn from. And some of my literary heroes were the Berenstain Bear family in those young
Oh,
years.
I love Berenstain Bears. Loved them.
We do too. And our kids were obsessed. The books were in shards. And we had to tape them up so many times for the kids and even the new ones we bought. And yet we all made fun of Mama Bear because she's so harsh and critical. And so I think we were doing a bit of marriage analysis even in our Berenstain Bears. But I also loved and felt such a kinship with many literary characters. Finally, Ramona Quimby came out. I had been reading the
Oh,
Dick and Jane with everybody, and some of the more Babysitters Club books, which were starting to get into some issues. But Ramona was a character-driven novel for kids that developed the interior of a child, and she was relatable because she felt a lot of feelings, whereas a lot of the books were plot-driven, and those were of interest. But I loved the psychological development in her books. There was never really any remedy. It was just being understood. So that became something that I read and reread and continue to read even when I met Wes. Here's a book that'll help us to understand our lives as people. And he hadn't done much reading as a child. So we even read some of that together. But anything from her, Judy Blume, and then getting into the classics in high school, I still think Scarlet Letter is one of the best quintessential American novels out there. I love
that's
it
a good one.
because women have a lot of, hardship, and so do pastoral figures. And in that book, for those that don't know, it was just a great story to sort of show how we can judge ourselves and others too harshly. And there's just a lot of despair, but also some hope, because when we see in literature somebody learns something, even if it's like this book in this case was used to teach a culture about how the Salem witch trials and such like that were often unfairly depicted. I've always connected with books like that, like show me the villain's story, show me the person who's misunderstood, and perhaps together we can find something light, something hopeful.
That is so awesome. I mean, that is just I never thought about, definitely read Ramona the Pest, Ramona
Yeah.
Quimby. Yeah, I
Yeah.
definitely read that. And you're
Yeah.
right. It didn't, I was just thinking back on, as you were speaking about, just like her emotions. And you're right. Like it was about emotions. It wasn't so much about the plot.
Mhm.
And you're right. Like once you get a hold of a book like that when you're younger, as you're coming up, just to realize kind of like what emotions are, especially if you don't grow up in a household where that's even discussed at all.
Mhm.
It really helps you, I think,
Mhm.
realize like you're not alone and you're not weird for having different emotions. And that's a perfectly human experience. So
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
really love that. And you've brought so much. Speaking of that, like, so take us from adolescence to what did you do in college? What were your majors and what was your experience in college? Once you started learning some of the ways to sort of be a therapist and serve others, how did that go? Did that feel true to you?
As a high schooler, I had been very cliquey. And when I got to college, a journey God brought me on was humbling me in some of the ways that I needed to be humbled. And it was, again, an interior sense. There was no grand action. It was more like if you choose to go to Michigan State University, where I was planning to go, you're going to be too tempted. You're going to party and you're going to fall off the wagon of what your real purpose is. So, going to Eastern Michigan University was for me a bit of a bore, which for those who understand the type 7, boring is hard for us. But it gave me a time to focus on learning and really just being around people who wouldn't be popular. In fact, I felt like there was a popular, even Christian faith group on campus. It was called Campus Crusade for Christ at the time. I decided to join the other group that wasn't popular, mainly because I wanted to stay away from, like I said, I was like, I'll probably be partying in that group and at the popular group. And so I just went to a group where I wasn't well known, but it was like they got to know me and they just thought I was one of the crew. There was no favoritism. And that was an important season of my life, to just be one of the crew and to learn how to not like social in group and social out group as much. So I feel like that was the very biggest lesson outside of the academics I got in college, was again that psychological learning of how do you just live amongst people who are different? How do you love people who are different? And then how do you allow yourself to be bored? And that allowed me to settle into my studies. And now I was thriving as a student and graduating with honors and allowing myself the ability to do a research project where my professors were starting to say, hey, there's a paper I want to read out loud in class. And I would be just this quiet student in the back, and they would, several professors read my papers in class and approached me and said, you have a gift here. And so one of my communications professors really took me under his wing. He was a very ethical man. Even took Wes around because I was dating my now husband, and he brought us to Youngstown State University for presenting research that I did. And so I just had some good support, but I had to sort of get bored first and get serious and let myself really delve into my field, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, it really seems like you're very emotionally mature at that age. I mean, you had some awareness that these things are not good for me. This is the gluttony part of the
Mm-hmm.
seven, to partying and taking everything to the extreme and keeping so busy that nothing feels clear. And like you knew that without even knowing the Enneagram, like you knew that inherently about yourself. And I think that's one thing about like when you learn about the Enneagram, we've been doing all these things for, like we're doing it again or whatever. Like we know ourselves enough to know like when we're doing things that are inherently bad for us. But once you got focused
Mm-hmm.
and you were able to, I mean, it sounds like it was, definitely easier to hear your calling once you get focused. So I
Yeah,
definitely,
I had some awareness. Mm-hmm.
yeah. And so once you started learning about, you know, being a therapist and being trained, was it falling into place for you?
There were other hardships in my life, but the school part was going really well. And the other hardships would just be the boredom, the loneliness, of walking through college without partying and really having a blast. Like I was still very busy. I did running. I made these friendships with these people that weren't really soul friends. They were just innocent people. And I had been hanging around with sort of snobs and being a snob and testing a lot of limits. So it was like this sobering time of just getting serious. And there was a lot of boredom and sadness in that, but there was also a lot of peace. So it was a lot of different deep feelings that I had in those years. And I allowed myself to pray a lot, to do fitness a lot, and to study a lot, and to spend time with my boyfriend and my mom and my family.
No, that's beautiful. I mean, it really is. And it sounds like, so one thing I wanted to talk about is getting focused and getting the distractions away so you could sort of have clarity in your calling. There's a book that Christa wrote. Christa's written several books, but this one is called The Overflowing Life. I just realized that she wrote that when we were talking about recording this podcast. And so I went ahead and bought it and read it. And it's basically a workbook, and it takes you through 7 days, and it's just a few minutes each day. And you is basically, to me, it seems like it is getting away. It is like narrowing down distractions in your life and things that are keeping you from getting that clarity, which, if you're busy and you're, you're a parent, you're working, whatever, you're a busy person, it's easy to have all these things cloud in on you and you're not even able to have a second to think. As a parent, that's really easy to happen. It's not to have a second to think. But I really thought that was great about that workbook, is it kind of helped drill down on all these things that could be getting in your way. And so can you tell us a little bit about what drove you to write The Overflowing Life?
Well, that book I wrote because I've had a counseling and coaching center, as you mentioned, for 11 years. And when I was early on in my practice there, and this is 10 years from when I first started to study couples and work with couples. So about partway in, I built my own practice, and I realized that I wanted some systems for my individuals that I was working with. I liked the work that was just, hi, let's meet for a session. But I wanted people to have a takeaway tool. And I had a lot of worksheets going, and I wanted something systemic just for people to have a system. And so I thought about it, what are we as, people of faith, those listening who might share my Christian faith, what do we want as Christians? And I was thinking about how we want the abundant life that Jesus promises, but we often sell ourselves short of that. And so I wanted to really help people to find that. And I felt like through this journey that I've been sharing about, that I had found that, and it didn't come easily, but there it was, where I was able to love, give, and serve. And I had also learned about burnout by then, because now we're talking 10 years after the undergrad years, and I'd walked through seasons of burnout. So I really wanted to gift my clients with something practical and easy to look at, because as I said, the worksheets were too cumbersome, and it's a short book, as it's doable. You can even do it in one sitting. I have it arranged over 7-day process, but when people start doing their work, they want to get moving now. And so I really like to give them something that they could digest quickly and move ahead with clarity on.
Yeah. And excuse me, and my takeaway from that, in doing that, I definitely spend a lot of time just wasting time. At the end of the day, when I'm really tired, all I feel like I have the bandwidth for after the kids go to bed is just to scroll my phone. Yeah. And like, I want to do nothing that requires any mental fortitude because I'm done. But I could take that time. I actually do have more energy than I think. Imagine that.
Yes.
To still, I can do something that doesn't require too much, mental load, but that would keep me moving forward in the things that I feel that are valuable that I could bring to other people. And I really think it was a great book in kind of getting you thinking in that direction, and also moving forward in a proactive way Like before before you go to do this, at the end of the day, are you going to be happy with what you've gotten done? Like, should
Mm.
you, not in a shameful way, but
Yeah.
like, is that the way you want your day to end? Or would it be better if you did something that just one step that got you closer to whatever it is that you want to do? Like for me, it's, it's podcasting, it's writing. I try to write every day if I can, and I love to write and
Mm.
just learn about different things regarding those two topics. And I'm not quite sure what my exact purpose is, and I don't know if I'll ever like specifically know exactly what it is like I want to know.
Mm.
But I
Yeah.
know the general, I think a calling, and we'll talk about that. I talked about it in my previous podcast episode where I opened up the season talking about calling. A lot of people get that confused with like what you actually do for a job, but I don't necessarily think it has to be that. I think it could
I love
be,
that.
in general, and it could look like different things in different seasons of your life.
Mm.
And some
Mm.
seasons have to be, one of the books I talked about the different seasons.
Mm.
And some of those seasons have to be, a season that you have clarity or you're like preparing the ground for the later bloom of the plants. Like you have to get things
Mm.
prepared
Mm.
and do
Mm.
that prep work to later. So anything that you can do to kind of keep it moving, I think is really helpful. So what about the present time? Tell us a little bit about, so we talked about college and we talked a little bit about those early years. So what do you, I guess, before you answer sort of like what you're doing, what do you think your calling is? If someone says, Christa, what is your overall calling? How would you answer that?
I would say it's to help couples to find peace and joy and compassion. Those are really the big three. And they kind of look at my three gifts, my 7, my 9, my 4. And those three just really encompass what I like to bring to everybody. I think there's a lot of great gifts otherwise, but those are the ones that I feel equipped and completely ready to share with people when I have the strength to do so. Because the day, like you said, we burn out. Sometimes we have to start over or we get sick. We have a season of life where we have to pull away. I get that. But when I'm healthy, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. And I know a lot of people don't have that awareness, like you said, of their call. And I love how you said sometimes it takes seasons of preparing or even minimally preparing, and it also doesn't always come as clearly for some people. And so that's why I like to use my gifts also to help some of my individual clients who aren't coming to me for couples work, to do that too. So we do a bit of finding the purpose-driven life. Even today, I'll have a client who's just single, and we love to work together and to process that part of life too. But generally speaking, I'm still going to be trying to offer her peace, joy, compassion as well.
I love that. I love how you just brought tri-type. And for those, I don't really talk about tri-type too much on here, but for those that are curious about tri-type, that is your dominant number in each center, and the centers are the head, heart, and body. And so Krista just told what hers was. And I loved how, again, that's the nuance that she brings to all of her work in the collective. So I encourage you all to get in the collective with us. It's fun. It's like a little meeting spot that I look forward to every month when I can make it. But I love how you brought that. Like those are, if you're looking for your gifts and you don't have someone to maybe bounce ideas off of as to what your gifts are, maybe try looking at your Enneagram type and also your tri type. So that may be a good indicator as to what you bring.
I
And
really love that. I'm glad you said that because I think tri-type is excellent for career and life purpose.
that's a good point. I love that. I love that you brought that up. So let's talk a little bit about your book. So you're a published author. You've published, I think, 8 books, self-published. And so the most recent one is the one that you worked with a publisher. And I was on that, lucky enough to be on the launch group. And Krista was so kind to like kind of bring us into the just behind the scenes as to what it was like to publish a book. Because I want to publish a book at some point. I'm going to go ahead and manifest that on this podcast. But she brought us into the backstory as to what it was like to work with a publisher and just what that personal journey was for her, which I thought I was very honored to be in that and just to understand her heart behind it. And so the book again is called The Enneagram and Marriage, Your Guide to Thriving Together in Your Unique Pairing. And
Thank you. Oh, thank you for sharing it.
but this book is so good, and it really kind of goes in, it has a brief intro into the Enneagram types, and then it talks about the glow pairings together, about what you look like with your partner. But then it also carefully weaves in like loving and just having a loving heart towards your partner and offering them grace, offering yourself grace and your partner grace, and really just, it's not like you want to find out about what they do and what their type is just to be like, nailed it. But it's more like you're, gives you an understanding. And so you can offer them grace because you're like, okay, this is not something they're doing towards me. This is something they do, like in general, towards like maybe everybody. It's like their approach.
Yeah.
And it kind of helps you like have a little bit more objectivity on it because relationships are so emotionally laced, and even for a 5, it's sometimes hard to think objectively about those closest relationships and not feel like your feelings are hurt when in reality it probably has to do more with their type and all your type is your coping style anyway. So it's just how you've learned how to cope with the world. And
Yes.
what's great about the Enneagram is you don't have to stay there. Like once you learn how you cope, you can learn different ways to cope. And that's what your growth number is, or your growth paths. And Christa also talks about, which I thought was really, I haven't been in probably enough therapy as I should, but there is a section on how to work through like a conflict or like a hurt and how to bring that up in like the words to say to someone. And I was like, that's wild because I definitely didn't have the words to say that before. And I just think it is such an important marriage book for everyone. It's just so much good information here. And again, it definitely weaves in her faith for Christ and just, encourages love for each other. And I just think you did a marvelous job on this, Christa. Wonderful job.
So much. I am so grateful that God gave me the opportunity to do it, and at Baker Book House and my agent Chris Farabee, that they all partnered with me, that you on the launch team made it a bestseller. It was just a special project, and now it's here. It is here, and we can share it, and I'm so glad we are.
So I know it's your baby. Like how was it conceived?
Yeah, it was conceived because I started to get into the many multiple forms again. This is a part of me as a scattered type 7 that I love creating. I love bringing forms to people and bringing systems. But I soon had so many forms from my Enneagram and Marriage coaching certification program, about 1,000 pages of materials, that I realized that it was going to be a bit hard to really get the fullness of everything I wanted to share in one spot. And even for the coaches I was training when they're working with their clients, of course, the forms are great because this client can use this form and this client would use a different one. But I just wanted to make a system for everybody. And so it really, especially one other piece is I saw Enneagram and Marriage books starting to come out, and I knew that I had done a lot of work with couples for 20 years. So I'm like, you know what? I need to be part of this too. And they have great things to share, but so do I. And I knew they were different also because I was just discovering the ways that couples rubbed off on each other. And I hadn't seen anyone else really attach themselves to that concept of how over time, it's not just that you're with a spouse of a different type, you become something like them in some ways. So I think that our personalities do rub off on each other. And I wanted to talk about that too. So all of that birthed me to say, you know what, let's do another book, but this time let's do it with somebody else, because community will be really good for this project. It'll get the word out bigger and better. And I felt like my community before was my clients, and now my community was spread out all over the globe. So it just made more sense to go with a publisher.
And I really love that one thing that you said was, other people are doing this. It's like flavors, right? Like for coffee. It's like you have coffee, which is the
Yeah.
Enneagram. Then you have all these flavors, coffee and
Yeah.
creamer, coffee and pumpkin spice pop,
That's a good
coffee and
analogy.
vanilla. But this is like Enneagram and marriage, Enneagram at work, Enneagram, whatever, Enneagram and
Yes.
grief. So, but you definitely realize like other people are doing this, but my
Mm.
voice matters too. And I hope you all hear this. Like it's so
Yeah.
easy to compare yourself if,
Yeah.
on, especially on social media, because you tend to follow people who are doing things you want to do. So you're
Mm.
comparing yourselves with a very niche group, perhaps,
Yeah.
and that are spread out all over the place
Yeah.
that people in everyday life might not ever hear about. So
Yeah.
it seems like they're all over the place and there's not a spot for you. But
Yeah.
in reality, there's your people that will meant to hear it. For one, they will
Mm-hmm.
hear it if they're meant to. That's what I feel like.
Yes. Me
But
too.
also they're not going to ever like see everything the way that you're seeing it.
Yeah.
They're not going to have access to all those people like you're having access. It's
Yes.
virtual. It's not even real life.
Yes.
So please
Yes.
hear that. Like
Yes.
if you are searching for your calling, if you are searching for your purpose, you think this has already been done, because I like to be unique. So I do know that, I'm not saying I am unique, but I like to feel unique. So
Yeah.
this is the
We're
for
all
me.
unique. I love
Right.
that.
But there's a strong desire for that. But we are all unique anyway.
Mhm.
We're unique in Christ, and we all have our unique way that we're going to say things or do things. And so I just wanted, I'll get off the soapbox now, but I just wanted to offer that in case
Yes. I
you're
love that
struggling.
perspective.
But I
Yes.
love that you brought this to us. This is such gold. It's
Thank
so,
you.
who do you think, like, who do you see that's going to benefit the most from this group, this book? Like, do you feel like you need to already have some Enneagram knowledge? Do you need to take a test first? Where do you feel like someone should start from before they pick the book up? Like, at what place?
I think the person who's able to be a little more regulated does a bit better with this book. If you're in a marriage and things are blah or average or boring, or you have a little bit of doubt about your chemistry, like all these are great places to read my book from, or even if your marriage is doing great. But if you're like, we are literally at each other's throats, one of us is about to move out, I don't think this is the book for you, because
Gotcha.
I want you to get the help you need. And I would rather see you just hit a John Gottman book first. But if
Okay.
you are right at the space of like, no, I know I love this person, I'm committed, this is a great place for you to start, because it gives you that opportunity to have enough regulation to do some personality study to say, what would the nuances be with me? And as you can imagine, that takes some insight-based thinking, not just some survival-based thinking. You've got to be able to really allow yourself, just like I said, when I was an undergrad, I had to pull away from my complete party phase to study. And it can be a bit boring and dry. And there are a lot of seasons of marriage like that. So if you're in that season of marriage where you're like, I'm busy all the time with kids, or I'm bored, or it's dry, this is a good season to pick up this book so that you can find life again together. I really created for you to find refreshment as you find your gifts and the ways you can shine together. And I give you practices that you can find each week together so that you can really allow your love to grow again and to find your purpose together and your mission. So I just want to nurture and water couples and individuals who are in those spaces of like, just meh.
And that's what I really love is like in each chapter, you have action items. And that's one thing I know about Christa from working with her in the collective, is she definitely wants us not to just learn it. She wants us to put this into practice. She was like, okay, and even in the book, The Overflowing Life, like once you know this, now what are you going to do? And I
Correct.
want you to take notes, and I want you to commit this to your memory, because if you write it, you're going to remember it more. And if you
Mhm.
remember it more, you're going to, I want to know what you're going to do with it. So I think those are all great tips, because I can definitely, in reading the book, I definitely, there's some, definitely it's very thought provoking. If you're in a really emotional space and you're in that survival, like amygdala, animal instinct kind of, headspace, it might
Mhm.
be a little tough to absorb everything that's coming. but it is not written in a complicated way. I want to say that. But you
Mhm.
do emotionally, it's not really going to do you much good unless you're at a place where you can actually do something with it in your marriage. And it sounds like if it's already at the brink of maybe, I don't want to say disaster, but if it's like in a really bad place, like you might want to get some, like you said, Gottman tips maybe first.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
how is it best used? If
Mhm.
one partner reads it, like should both read it or can one read it?
I think that when one person reads a book, if they're willing to take the lead and put it into practice and ask their partner to take some steps and to have some conversations, that's great. Now, most of my books, when I'm working with a couple, because this is not my first rodeo, as you know,
Um,
I
that's what I
typically
love.
I typically have them read a chapter or two, whatever we decide, in between our sessions. So I'm doing a course in January so that I can have a bit more healthy control with my couples that want to really walk through this book, because I feel that itch of people being in disarray even with it. And I'm like, I want people to have a tracking with it. I want them to learn, and I want them to take, like you said, the action tips. So here's what I'm recommending. Take my course if you want a deeper dive, if you want to have some accountability in January. Otherwise, take some time, just you, read it, give yourself one action tip for the week, and then talk to your spouse about it. Say, hey, I've been reading chapter 1 or 2. This is an action tip I'm going to be taking this week. Do you want to be a part of that? And try to keep it succinct so you don't lose them. Unless they're truly showing you nonverbal signs that they're really invested and interested, keep it light. And then if they say yes, then that's a great thing. Encourage that and ask how you guys can hold each other accountable. So, for instance, if you said, I'm going to be trying to be more logical in our conflicts this week, and they said, yeah, that sounds great. And you said, are you going to do the same? Or do you want to try to be a little bit more positive during our conflicts? Then you guys could say, yes, let's write it into our phones, email ourselves that we're checking in with each other on our date night on Sunday. Did we do it? So that's really, like you said, how we can actually make changes is when we tangibly take a tool, talk it through, and then make a plan to work on it, and then check back in together to see if it happened. And as you heard me say, I love compassion. We don't want to shame each other if it didn't happen. We just want to look at why it didn't. Okay, well, we had a big week. Remember, you got sick. We got that unexpected dental visit, whatever it was, we can give some grace and start over. But I think that marriage has a lot of seasons like that. There's going to be a lot of, for instance, oil
Yeah.
changes versus just everything's perfect and we never have work to do. We never have to look at it again. So just keep that in mind, because a lot of type 1 clients will be like, I think we should never have problems. And that's just not realistic. But now I'm at least giving you good tools to walk through it.
Well, and as you know, being married to a type 1, it's not, it hasn't been helpful in my experience saying like, let's work on our marriage. Not that, I'm not saying that we're in dire straits or anything, but, I feel like I do have one in my tri type. So I feel like there is always room for improvement and learning.
Good. I'm glad you
So,
explained that side of the one. Yes.
right. So I do, I do see, a value in it. I don't think that things have to be broken to want to improve it, because I want things to be as best as they can be,
I
and
like
to be that
that.
really, that's the sexual subtype. Like I want it to be very
Yes,
dramatic,
you
very wonderful,
do.
very over the top. So
Mhm.
this gets me there.
Yes,
This helps. So that would be my motivation. But
good.
if I bring it to my one husband and saying, like, I think we should work on a marriage, that's not going to go over too well, because that's going to come across as a criticism, even if I wasn't meaning it as one. That's how it's going to be perceived, because they don't really ingest criticism well.
Mhm.
And,
Mhm.
but I think if you have like an open invitation, I'm reading this book, I'm doing this course, I find it interesting. Here's some things I've learned. Drop it. See if
Yes,
there's some nonverbal. See if
right.
he's picking up what I'm putting down.
Love it.
And then, go whenever he's open for like a conversation. And as a
Yes.
one, he doesn't really love talking about emotions. So I know that I'm not really going to get anywhere talking about that. But we're both
Right.
very logical. So we can easily miss that whole emotional part if I don't
Mm,
bring it. But I have 4 in my tri-type, not to get too nuanced in this, but I have 4 in my tri-type. So I know that's something that I do bring.
that's
So
good.
it's my responsibility to bring that. And, but yeah, that's just, that's just something I've noticed is if I bring it, like, hey, would you like to join me? Like what you said, like, it's just an invitation. I'm doing this. Do you want to do it with me?
Mm,
I think
mhm.
I can be very blunt. So
Yeah.
learning how to say it in like a softer way is helpful.
Mm. Isn't that true? Oh, I love that you bring that because, like you said, sometimes a one or another person who just says, I just like to keep things black and white, they might say, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. It's not part of my makeup unless
Yeah.
they also really are in touch with that emotional side. And so, just for you to say, I know that and I can bring that. That's great for anyone listening. Like if you have the emotional piece, bring it, but just don't overwhelm your partner with it. Let
Right.
them bring you their logic too, or their positivity too.
Or just work on yourself. I mean, that's just the
Mhm.
biggest, thing you can do, really. I mean, if you're working on yourself and you're trying some of the stuff, like if I
Yeah,
know my husband's tense about something, he's going through a hard time, I can just
yeah,
go give him like a shoulder massage, even though he says he doesn't want one. He wants
yeah,
one
yeah.
because I know when I'm tense, like if
Mm.
somebody like gives me a massage, I may pull back at
Yes,
first, but I really
yes,
want one. Like I don't know
mm.
that I need one, but I do need one. I don't
Yes,
know. Like I just
exactly.
feel like he needs it and he calms
Mm.
down,
Oh, that's
and I just say, "Yeah, tell me,
oh,
like let him get his anger out if he's angry about
oh,
something, and I'm just like, "Go, like tell me what it
mm,
is. Don't hold back. I'm not judging you and
mm,
let it out, and just be in the same room." But that's just,
mm.
maybe a little too personal, but now I'm already
No,
feeling like
it's
a
not. I think everyone here loves to hear, like, hey, we invite healthy touching too, and that brings us into our connection together.
Yeah, because at first, like, I would try to give him a massage and he'd be like, I don't want that. And be like, okay. But now I'm like, you want it. I'll go to the
Yeah.
8 and be like, you're getting this massage. I think we're kind of coming to a close here. I knew we wouldn't get to the bonus part, but that's all right because you and I seem to like really get on, talking and going down. I can go down a tangent too very
Me
easily.
too.
But it's such a joy talking to you anyway. I just love it. Um,
Oh, thank you.
So now that
Too.
you've done this, what do you see, if you want to share, as part of yours regarding your calling to do in the future? What do you see as
Hmm.
work? How do you want to be expansive in your work, your
Hmm.
current work?
Thank you. I really have been loving online classes with people. I think that what I'm feeling fierce about these days is connecting and experiencing together, community. And it's not that I want to do that with everybody. If I'm being honest, I really like to do that with people who are trying to learn and grow. That's
Right.
always been something that has been attractive to me. And I've always really struggled with people when they're like, I don't care about growth. I'm just like, oh, that's so boring. I
Yes.
think that's probably it. Or
Yeah.
I may even feel that's wasteful. So I
Yeah.
like to be around people who want to better themselves and be part of helping them to do that with my gifts, just as, of course, I need people to do that with me. So just continuing to share my writing. I look forward to creating a Substack. I don't know if I was planning on doing that. That's been on my wish list all
I didn't
year.
know.
Yeah, I've had it, and I've been telling a few people about that, but I really want to get involved in writing on Substack more. It's been my goal for about a year. So I'm excited to have just closed out another project and be able to do that, not this second, but soon, to give myself a space to do a bit more creative writing versus just here's our next podcast, here's our next sale. So I like to connect through writing and community, and Instagram and Facebook don't give me much opportunity for that. So a little bit here and there, but looking forward to that. Looking forward to continued writings of marriage helping tools, books. That's really it. And then meeting with community as we process that. That's my vocation. And there will be, like I said, places where I'm learning from others and doing that same thing in other people's groups. But this is my way of contributing, and it feels very solid that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I'm hopeful that the audience will stick around for all that comes next.
Do you have any final tips for our listeners on how to find the calling, or like if they're just struggling, they can't figure out you've already told us tips on how to find out your strengths using the Enneagram, and you can also use your weaknesses, can figure out your weaknesses from that as well. Any final tips on finding their calling if they're in the journey?
I would just encourage people to look at what they're passionate at and what they're pretty good at. And notice I didn't say perfect at. I really want to emphasize that if you're pretty good at something and you like doing it, keep doing it. You're going to get better and better and way better. So even if you're not, like I said, a master or even advanced, but you're beginner or intermediate, but you like it and you have some sort of a knack for it, that's what I would love to see you really go after. And even if it's only in my book, I talk about 5 different minutes that you can spend on weaknesses, but 10 minutes a day on the things that you're really gifted in. So if it was that you wanted to learn Spanish and you wanted to be part of a teaching English to others, you could just spend 10 minutes a day on Duolingo as your goal and just keep going. And then the next step after that might be that you take a course in a different season of life. But don't give up on your strengths. Just keep developing them, because as we said, in time, you'll get to put those gifts to use as you build up the learning. And so just develop something you can do briefly, cheaply, affordably, and keep building your relationships up as you build your purpose. You don't want to leave your people in the dust. As we said, your family's your foundation. So taking care of you and your people will take a lot of your time. That's why I said, even if it's 10 minutes a day, keep going. Finding your life purpose provides a lot of fulfillment, even when other parts of life are stressful.
And that's great tips. And one thing I really love seeing people and go back to things they love doing. I love seeing that. That's one thing that just like warms my heart. So even if don't even think that it has to make money or be like your job, do what you love, and that just makes you a better person. And, like I said in the previous episode, like a stick that's in the mud and trying to get unstuck in life, and you have to move it different ways. So you may get a hold of things that are not right for you, but
Yes.
it's still it might be a skill, or, it's an experience that you've had that helps you grow as a person as a whole. And I do agree. Just do what you love, and it will expand your life and the lives around you. And Christa, you have been such a joy to talk to. I could talk to you forever, but we both have Thanksgiving things to do now.
Yes.
Thank you so much. This has been so much fun.
Oh, you are always the best host. Thank you so much for just having me. You and your audience are beloved, and thank you so much for this special time.